Chapter 4, Ethics in Research. Ethics in research is about being honest and respectful to all individuals who are affected by your research. It means that you have two ethical responsibilities. One is responsibility against your participants. That means you have to respect them and you shouldn't harm them in any way. The second responsibility is to make sure when you are reporting your research are accurate and honest to your readers or those who receive the results of your research. There is a history, unfortunately a sad history behind these research ethics or ethical guidelines. There are some examples that led to new guidelines or the new ethical rules on scientific research. For example, the Nazi scientists, they wanted to see if you break a bone over and over, what happens, and they used actually human subjects to do their research. Another example was done in Jewish chronic disease hospital, in which they injected live cancer cells to patients to see how it works. And in a more recent case, they let 400 people suffer from syphilis long after a cure was available. And probably the most famous one, a lot of people know about it, is the Milgram's experiment. Milgram's study was about conformity. The experimenter wanted to know how far people go to obey the authorities. So the experimenter asked a few participants to play a learner role, and their job was to pretend that they are receiving electric shock. And another group of participants were playing the teacher role, and their job was to ask the learner a question. If the answer was wrong, they would increase the electric shock each time that they give a wrong question. The teachers didn't know that there is no real electric shock, but the learners were pretending, they were in another room, that they were pretending that they are receiving shock. The result was when the researcher who insisted or asked the teachers to continue despite the fact that the learner was yelling and crying and screaming, to continue and increase the shock every single time. So you might be thinking, okay, no problem, there was not a real electric shock, so nobody was harmed. But you gotta notice that although there wasn't a physical harm, but these teachers, these subjects, after the experiments, they were ashamed of themselves that how far they went on this experiment. So that's why, after these kind of terrible and sad stories in the history of scientific research, they came with some ethic codes. The first one was the Nuremberg Code, right after World War II, and it included only 10 simple guidelines, and 25 years later 2 more acts were approved to protect the participants in scientific research. These are called the Belmont Report guideline. The main thing in Belmont Report is that you should get the agreement of the participants when you start your experiment, and of course you're not supposed to do any harm on your participants, and also you need to be fair in your sampling or in selecting your participants. More recently, American Psychological Association created their own guidelines that's more accurate and more detailed in terms of research, what you are supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. What is the difference between this guideline and the earlier one is the focus on psychological as well as physical harm. So anything that you do, if your participant feels that they have been cheated, tricked, or deceived, or insulted, that's against these ethical guidelines. In your textbook, there is a table that explains the more important aspect of the ethical guidelines that you're supposed to follow, and the focus is on informed consent, that you have to give them complete information before they agree to participate. You have to give them complete information before they agree to participate.